Prince Alexander stood at the tall window of his palace bedroom, watching the morning sun paint the kingdom in golden light. His reflection stared back at him from the glass, a young man of 25 with dark hair and tired eyes that held secrets too heavy for someone his age. Today was different from all other days. Today, everything would change forever. The kingdom of Valdris had been his home since birth, but it had never felt like a prison until now. Every stone in the castle, walls seemed to whisper his duties. Every portrait of past kings reminded him of the crown that would soon rest on his head. His father, King Edmund, had ruled for 37 years with wisdom and strength. The people loved him, the nobles respected him, and neighboring kingdoms feared his military might. Alexander knew he had big shoes to fill, but that wasn't what made his heart race with worry this morning. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Your Highness, may I enter?" The voice belonged to Marcus, his childhood friend and now personal advisor. Marcus was the only person in the palace who knew the real Alexander, not just the prince everyone expected him to be. "Come in," Alexander said without turning from the window. He heard footsteps on the marble floor, then felt Marcus's presence beside him. "The coronation preparations are almost complete," Marcus said quietly. "The great hall has been decorated, with flowers from every corner of the kingdom. Representatives from 12 different countries have arrived to witness your crowning. Your father seems proud, though he tries to hide how tired he's become." Alexander nodded but said nothing. His mind was somewhere else entirely, in a small cottage on the edge of the kingdom where a young woman with bright green eyes was probably tending to her garden right now. Elena. Even thinking her name made his chest tight with emotions he couldn't express to anyone, not even Marcus. "There's something else," Marcus continued, his voice more careful now. "Lady Catherine arrived this morning with her family. The marriage contract negotiations will begin immediately after your coronation ceremony. Lady Catherine, the daughter of Duke Harrison from the neighboring kingdom of Moravia. Beautiful, intelligent, well-educated, and everything a future queen should be. Alexander had met her twice before at royal gatherings. She was polite and graceful, spoke 3 languages fluently, and understood politics better than most men twice her age. Any king would be lucky to have her as a wife. Any king except Alexander. "I see," was all he managed to say. Marcus studied his friend's face in the window's reflection. They had grown up together, learned sword fighting and horseback riding side by side, shared secrets and dreams when they were boys. Marcus could read Alexander's moods better than anyone, and right now he saw pain that ran deeper than royal duties. "Alexander," Marcus said softly, using his friend's real name instead of his title. "What's troubling you? And don't tell me it's just nervousness about becoming king. I know you better than that." Alexander finally turned away from the window. His room was large and magnificent, with tapestries showing great battles and golden furniture that cost more than most people earned in their entire lives. But despite all the luxury, he felt trapped. He walked to his writing desk and picked up a letter that had arrived the night before. The paper was simple, not the expensive kind used in the palace, and the handwriting was neat but unpracticed. It smelled faintly of lavender. "This came yesterday evening," Alexander said, holding the letter carefully as if it might break. "Elena sent it through Thomas, the blacksmith's son. She's getting married next month." Marcus's eyes widened. He knew about Elena, of course. Alexander had met her 2 years ago when he was traveling through the kingdom in disguise, trying to understand how common people lived. Elena worked in her family's bakery and didn't know he was the prince until much later. By then, they had fallen deeply in love, meeting secretly whenever Alexander could escape from palace duties. "Married? To whom?" Marcus asked. "A merchant's son from the next village. Her parents arranged it. She says he's a good man who will provide for her family." Alexander's voice cracked slightly. "She says she hopes I'll be happy with my bride, and that she'll always treasure the time we had together." The letter had torn Alexander's heart in two. Elena was doing what she thought was right, just as he was expected to do what was right for the kingdom. Neither of them had chosen this path, but both understood their duties to their families and their people. "You could stop this," Marcus said carefully. "You're going to be king. You could—" "What? Marry a baker's daughter?" Alexander laughed, bitterly. "The nobles would revolt. Our alliance with Moravia would crumble. The kingdom needs this marriage, Marcus. Father has explained it to me a dozen times. Lady Catherine brings not just her beauty and intelligence, but also her father's army and trade agreements that will make Valdres stronger than ever." Alexander moved to another window, this one facing the direction of Elena's village. He couldn't see it from here, but he knew exactly where it was. He had ridden there so many times his horse knew the way without guidance. Those secret meetings had been the happiest moments of his life. Elena laughed at his jokes, challenged his ideas, and loved him for who he was, not for his title or wealth. "Sometimes I dream about running away," Alexander admitted. "Just taking a horse and riding as far as I can go. Maybe to the sea, or to one of those distant kingdoms where no one knows who I am. I could be a farmer or a teacher or anything except a prince." "But you won't," Marcus said. It wasn't a question. "No," Alexander agreed. "I won't. Because that would be selfish. My people need a king, not a lovesick fool who abandons his responsibilities for personal happiness." The bells in the castle tower began to chime, marking the hour. Soon, servants would arrive to help Alexander prepare for the day's ceremonies. There would be meetings with foreign dignitaries, a formal lunch with Lady Catherine and her family, and final preparations for tomorrow's coronation. Every moment would be scheduled. Every word he spoke would be carefully considered for its political impact. "Will you try to see her?" Marcus asked quietly. "Before the wedding, I mean. One last time?" Alexander closed his eyes. The thought had been torturing him since he received Elena's letter. One last glance at the woman he loved, one final goodbye before he sealed his fate with a crown and a marriage to someone else. "I don't know," he whispered. "I honestly don't know if I'm brave enough or if it would be too cruel to both of us." Outside, the kingdom of Valdres continued its daily life, unaware that their future king was breaking apart inside the golden walls of his palace. The palace courtyard buzzed with activity as Alexander walked through it later that afternoon. Servants hurried back and forth carrying flowers, banners, and golden decorations. The sound of hammers echoed from the great hall where workers built, a platform for tomorrow's coronation ceremony. Everyone smiled and bowed when they saw him, their faces full of excitement and pride. To them, he was their beloved prince about to become their king. They couldn't see the storm raging inside his heart. Alexander found himself walking toward the stables without really planning to go there. The familiar smell of hay and horses usually comforted him, but today it only reminded him of all the secret rides to Elena's village. His favorite horse, Thunder, a black stallion with intelligent eyes, nickered softly when he approached. "Hello, old friend," Alexander murmured, stroking Thunder's neck. The horse had carried him through countless adventures, including every clandestine meeting with Elena. Thunder seemed to sense his master's mood and pressed his head against Alexander's chest, offering silent comfort. "Planning to go somewhere, Your Highness?" The voice belonged to Captain Richards, the head of the Royal Guard. He was a stern man in his 50s who took his duty to protect the prince very seriously. His weathered face showed concern as he studied Alexander's expression. "Just thinking," Alexander replied, though his eyes lingered on Thunder's saddle. The temptation to ride away from everything was stronger than ever. He could almost feel the wind in his hair, the freedom of the open road calling to him. Your father wishes to see you in his private study, Captain Richard said gently. He sent me to find you. Alexander's stomach tightened. His father rarely summoned him to the private study unless something important was happening. That room held King Edmund's most precious possessions: ancient books, maps of the kingdom, and portraits of every king who had ruled before him. It was where the most serious conversations took place. The walk through the palace corridors felt longer than usual. Alexander passed tapestries that told stories of great victories, statues of heroic ancestors, and windows that showed the prosperous kingdom his family had built over generations. Every step reminded him of the weight of responsibility that would soon rest on his shoulders. King Edmund was standing by the fireplace when Alexander entered the study. Despite being only 58 years old, the king looked tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. His once dark hair was now completely gray, and lines of worry marked his face. The crown of Valdris sat on a small table nearby, its jewels catching the light from the fire. "Father, you wanted to see me?" "Sit down, son." King Edmund gestured to a comfortable chair. "We need to talk before tomorrow's ceremony." Alexander sat, trying to read his father's expression. The king poured 2 glasses of wine from a bottle that had been aging in the castle cellars since before Alexander was born. It was a tradition. They would share this wine on the night before. Alexander became king, just as Edmund had shared it with his own father decades ago. "Tomorrow that crown becomes yours," Edmund said, settling into the chair across from his son. "With it comes power that most men can only dream of, but also burdens that will test every part of your character. I want you to understand what you're accepting." "I understand, Father. You've prepared me well." Edmund studied his son's face carefully. "Do you? Because understanding it in your mind is different from feeling it in your heart. When I became king, I thought I knew what it meant. I thought it would be about making grand decisions and leading armies into battle. But the hardest parts are the small, daily choices where you must put the kingdom's needs before your own desires." Alexander felt his cheeks burn. Did his father know about Elena, about the secret meetings and the love that threatened to tear him apart? "I married your mother because it was the right choice for Valdris," Edmund continued. "Her father controlled the eastern provinces, and our marriage united the kingdom under one rule. I won't lie to you. It wasn't love at first sight. But over time, we built something beautiful together. She became my closest advisor, my dearest friend, and eventually, the love of my life." The mention of his mother, Queen Isabella, who had died when Alexander was 16, brought tears to his son's eyes. She had been wise and kind, beloved by the people and respected by foreign leaders. Alexander still missed her guidance, especially now. "Lady Catherine is a remarkable young woman," Edmund said quietly. "She's intelligent, compassionate, and her marriage to you will secure peace between our kingdoms for generations. But I can see in your eyes that your heart is elsewhere." Alexander's wine glass trembled in his hand. "Father, You don't need to explain," Edmund interrupted gently. "I was young once, too. I know what it's like to have feelings that conflict with duty. But I also know that being king means making sacrifices that ordinary men never have to consider." The fire crackled in the silence that followed. Alexander stared into the flames, seeing Elena's face in the dancing light. He remembered her laughter, the way her eyes sparkled when she talked about her dreams, the gentle touch of her hand in his. All of that would become just a memory after tomorrow. "What if I'm not strong enough?" Alexander asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What if I disappoint you, disappoint the kingdom?" Edmund leaned forward and placed a weathered hand on his son's shoulder. "Strength isn't about never feeling doubt or pain. It's about doing what's right, even when it hurts. Every king in our family line has faced moments where they had to choose between personal happiness and the greater good. The fact that you're struggling with this decision proves you have the heart needed to rule wisely." But how do you live with it? How do you wake up every day knowing you gave up something precious? By remembering that your sacrifice means thousands of families can sleep safely in their beds, that children can grow up without fearing war, that merchants can trade freely, and farmers can plant their crops without worry. Your personal pain, as real as it is, becomes worthwhile when weighed against the welfare of so many others. Edmund stood and walked to a shelf filled with ancient books. He pulled out a leather journal and handed it to Alexander. The cover was worn smooth from years of handling. This belonged to your great-grandfather, King Marcus the Just. He faced a similar choice when he was your age. Read his words tonight. They might bring you some comfort. Alexander took the journal carefully. King Marcus had been legendary for his wisdom and fairness. Stories of his reign were still told around fires in villages throughout the kingdom. There's something else, Edmund said, returning to his chair. After tomorrow's coronation, you'll need to make a decision about your future meetings with anyone who might complicate your role as king. I trust your judgment, but I want you to think carefully about what's best for everyone involved. The words hit Alexander like a physical blow. His father knew. Of course he knew. The king's network of informants kept him aware of everything. That happened in his kingdom, probably including his son's secret romance with a baker's daughter. You're not angry? Alexander asked. Angry? No, son. I'm sad for you, because I remember how it feels to have your heart pulled in directions your crown won't let you follow. But I'm also proud of you for handling this situation with discretion and honor. You could have caused a scandal, but you chose to protect both the girl's reputation and the kingdom's stability. Alexander felt tears threatening to spill over. His father's understanding somehow made everything harder. If Edmund had been angry or disapproving, it might have been easier to accept his fate. But this gentle compassion made his sacrifice feel even more profound. The hardest part, Alexander said, is knowing that she's marrying someone else. While I'm putting on the crown and pledging to marry Lady Catherine, Elena will be starting a new life with a man she barely knows. Perhaps that's for the best, Edmund said softly. Clean breaks heal faster than wounds that are constantly reopened. If you truly love this girl, then wanting her to find happiness with someone who can give her a normal life is the kindest gift you can offer. Outside the study windows, the sun was setting over the kingdom. Tomorrow would bring the coronation, the formal introduction to Lady Catherine's family, and the beginning of Alexander's reign as king. Tonight was his last evening as simply a prince, his last night to dream of a different life. Get some rest, Edmund advised, standing up. Tomorrow will be a long day, and you'll need all your strength. The people are expecting their new king to shine like the sun itself. As Alexander left the study, carrying his great-grandfather's journal, he wondered if anyone in the kingdom's history had ever felt as alone as he did right now. Alexander couldn't sleep. He had tried lying in his enormous bed, reading his great-grandfather's journal, even walking around his room, but rest wouldn't come. The palace was quieter than usual, with most of the staff preparing for tomorrow's coronation ceremony. Through his window, he could see torches burning in the courtyard where guards maintained their watch. The moon was full and bright, casting silver light across the kingdom he would soon rule. At midnight, he made a decision that would haunt him forever. Moving quietly, Alexander dressed in simple clothes, a plain brown shirt, dark pants, and a hooded cloak that would help him blend into shadows. These weren't the fine silks and velvets expected of a prince, but the practical garments of a common traveler. He had done this many times before during his secret meetings with Elena, so he knew exactly how to slip out of the palace undetected. The corridors were dimly lit by occasional torches. Alexander's bare feet made no sound on the cold stone floors as he navigated through passages he had memorized in childhood. He passed the great hall where tomorrow's ceremony would take place, the kitchens where cooks were already preparing for the feast, and the servants' quarters where tired workers slept before another busy day. Getting to the stables required crossing an open courtyard. Alexander pulled his hood up and walked casually, just another figure in the night. The guards knew him well enough that his face would be instantly recognizable, but in common clothes and shadow, he looked like any young man who might have business in the castle. Thunder seemed to sense his master's approach before Alexander even reached the stable. The black stallion was awake and alert, as if he had been waiting for this moment. Alexander saddled him quickly, his hands working automatically through motions he had performed countless times. "One last ride, old friend," he whispered into Thunder's ear. "One last time." The stable boy, Peter, was asleep in the corner on a pile of hay. Alexander left a gold coin beside him, enough money to ensure the boy's silence if anyone asked questions later. Then he led Thunder through the back gate that opened onto a path leading away from the main road. Once they were clear of the palace grounds, Alexander mounted Thunder and urged him into a gallop. The wind whipped through his hair, and for a few precious moments, he felt free. The moonlight turned the familiar countryside into a silver dreamscape. Fields of wheat and barley stretched out on both sides of the road, occasionally interrupted by farmhouses where honest people slept peacefully, under their protection. The ride to Elena's village usually took 2 hours, but tonight Alexander pushed Thunder harder than usual. Every minute that passed brought him closer to dawn, and dawn would bring servants looking for their missing prince. He had perhaps 4 hours before his absence would be discovered and search parties sent out. Elena's village, Millbrook, was small and quiet at night. Most of the houses were dark, with only a few windows showing the warm glow of late-burning candles. The bakery, where Elena worked with her family, sat on the main street, its windows dark like all the rest. Alexander knew the layout of the village perfectly. He had visited it dozens of times over the past 2 years, always in disguise, always careful not to draw attention. Elena's family lived in a small house behind the bakery. Her father was the village baker, a kind man named Thomas who worked before dawn every day to provide fresh bread for his neighbors. Her mother, Sarah, helped in the shop and tended a small garden that produced vegetables for their table. Elena had 2 younger brothers who were learning their father's trade. Alexander tied Thunder to a tree at the edge of the village and walked the rest of the way on foot. His heart pounded as he approached Elena's house. A single candle burned in what he knew was her bedroom window on the 2nd floor. Was she awake? Was she thinking about him, as he had been thinking about her? He picked up a small pebble and tossed it gently against her window. Then another. On the 3rd try, he saw movement inside. A moment later, the window opened, and Elena's face appeared, framed by her long brown hair. Even in the dim moonlight, she was beautiful. Her green eyes widened when she recognized him, and her hand flew to her mouth to stifle a gasp of surprise. She looked around quickly to make sure no one else was watching, then gestured for him to wait. The window closed, and Alexander stepped back into the shadows. 5 minutes later, Elena emerged from a side door of the house. She wore a simple white nightgown with a shawl wrapped around her shoulders, and her feet were bare. She moved like a ghost, making no sound as she approached the spot where Alexander waited. "Alex," she whispered, using the false name he had given her when they first met. "What are you doing here? Your coronation is tomorrow. People will be looking for you." "I know," he replied, drinking in the sight of her face. "I couldn't stay. Away. I received your letter." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "You shouldn't have come. This makes everything harder." "I had to see you one more time. I had to—" Alexander's voice caught in his throat. Now that he was here facing her, he didn't know what to say. What words could possibly express everything he felt? Elena looked around nervously. "We can't talk here. Someone might see us. Follow me." She led him away from the houses, down a path that wound through a small grove of apple trees. This was a place they had met before, hidden from view, but close enough to the village that Elena could return quickly if needed. The trees were in full bloom, their white flowers glowing ghostly in the moonlight. When they reached a small clearing, Elena turned to face him. In the silver light, she looked like something from a fairy tale, beautiful and magical and heartbreakingly real. "You received my letter," she said softly. "Then you know about David." David, the merchant's son she was going to marry. Alexander nodded, unable to speak around the lump in his throat. "He's a good man," Elena continued. "Kind and hardworking. He'll provide for my family and give me children and a comfortable life. It's what my parents want. What they've always dreamed of for me." "But not what you want," Alexander said. Elena's tears finally spilled over. "What I want doesn't matter. Just like what you want doesn't matter. We both have duties, responsibilities, to people who depend on us. Elena—" Alexander stepped closer, reaching for her hand. "What if we ran away? Tonight, right now. I have gold, horses. We could go somewhere far from here, somewhere no one knows us." "And then what?" Elena asked, though she didn't pull her hand away. "You'd abandon your kingdom, leave your people. Without their king? I'd break my parents' hearts and leave my family in disgrace? That's not the man I fell in love with, Alex. The man I love would never be selfish enough to hurt so many people for his own happiness." Her words cut deeper than any sword. She was right, of course. The Alexander she loved was honorable and responsible, someone who put others' needs before his own desires. If he ran away with her, he would become someone else entirely, someone neither of them could respect. "So this is goodbye," he said, the words coming out rough and broken. "This is goodbye," Elena confirmed. She reached up and touched his face gently, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "But I want you to know that loving you has been the most beautiful thing in my life. Even though it has to end, even though it's breaking both our hearts, I wouldn't change a single moment. I'll never forget you," Alexander promised. "Never. Every day for the rest of my life I'll think of you and wish things could have been different." "Don't do that," Elena said firmly. "Don't spend your life looking backward. You're going to be a king, a great king. Your people need you to be fully present, fully committed to them. And your wife, she deserves a husband who gives her his whole heart, not just the pieces that aren't still here with me." "How can I give, Lady Catherine, my heart when it belongs to you?" Elena smiled through her tears. "Hearts are bigger than we think they are. There's room for different kinds of love. You loved your mother. You love your father. You love your kingdom. Now you'll learn to love your wife and your children. It won't be the same as what we had, but it can still be real and good and worthwhile." Wisdom in her words amazed him. Elena had never received formal education like the noble ladies at court, but she understood life and love and duty better than scholars who had studied for decades. "When is your wedding?" Alexander asked. 3 weeks from today. David's family wants to have the ceremony before the harvest season begins." Elena looked down at their joined hands. "When is yours?" 3 months. Father wants to give me time to settle into being king before adding a wife to my responsibilities." They stood in silence for several minutes, holding hands in the moonlight, memorizing each other's faces. This was their last moment together, and both of them knew it. Once they walked away from this clearing, they would become different people. She would become David's wife and eventually a mother. He would become King Alexander and eventually Lady Catherine's husband. "I should go," Elena finally whispered. "Dawn isn't far away, and you need to get back before you're missed." "Wait." Alexander pulled off his signet ring, the one bearing the royal seal of Valdres. "I want you to have this." "I can't take that. If someone saw it, hide it. Keep it somewhere safe. Someday, when we're both old and gray and surrounded by our families, Maybe you can look at it and remember that once upon a time, a prince loved a baker's daughter more than his own life. Elena took the ring, her fingers closing around the warm gold. What will you tell people when they ask where it is? That I lost it during a ride. It happens all the time with jewelry. She stood on her toes and kissed him softly, a kiss that tasted of salt tears and goodbye. It was gentle and sweet and final. Be happy, she whispered against his lips. For both of us, be happy. Then she turned and walked back toward the village, her white nightgown making her look like a spirit disappearing into the night. Alexander watched until she was completely out of sight, then stood alone in the clearing for a long time, his heart breaking and healing and breaking again. Alexander returned to the palace just as the first hints of dawn touched the eastern sky. His body moved automatically, leading Thunder back to his stall, climbing through the same passages he had used to escape, slipping into his room without being seen. But his mind felt disconnected from everything around him. The final goodbye with Elena had left him hollow, as if something essential had been carved out of his chest. He sat on the edge of his bed and stared at his bare hands. The absence of his signet ring was a physical reminder of what he had lost. In a few hours, servants would arrive to prepare him for his coronation. They would dress him in ceremonial robes, place the crown on his head, and present him to thousands of cheering subjects as their new king. He would smile and wave and speak the ancient words of the coronation oath, and no one would know that the most important part of him had been left in an apple grove outside a small village. Sleep was impossible, so Alexander spent the remaining hours before sunrise reading his great-grandfather's journal. King Marcus the Just had faced his own romantic dilemma at age 23. He had fallen in love with a young noblewoman from a rival kingdom, but his duty required him to marry the daughter of a powerful duke from their own realm. The journal entries from that time revealed a man tortured by the same conflicts that now plagued Alexander. The heart wants what it cannot have, one entry read, but the crown demands what the heart cannot give. I have learned that being king means carrying multiple sorrows at once. For the decisions you must make, for the roads you cannot take, for the love you must sacrifice for the greater good. But I have also learned that duty can become its own form of love, deeper and more lasting than passion. Another entry, written years later, provided some comfort. Today I watched my son take his first steps, and I realized that the path I chose, painful as it was, led to blessings I could never have imagined. My wife, once a stranger chosen by politics, has become my dearest companion. We built our love slowly, with patience and respect and shared purpose. It is different from the wildfire I felt in youth, but it burns steadier and warms more of life's corners. As the sun rose higher, the palace began to stir with activity. Alexander could hear servants moving through the corridors, preparing for the biggest celebration in the kingdom's recent history. Soon, Marcus knocked on his door with the first meal of the day and news of the morning's schedule. Your Highness, Lady Catherine has requested a private audience before the coronation ceremony, Marcus reported as Alexander picked at his breakfast. She wishes to discuss the expectations for their upcoming engagement announcement. Alexander nodded without enthusiasm. Lady Catherine was arriving at exactly the right time in his life, when he was emotionally exhausted and needed someone practical and sensible to help him navigate his new role. She would make an excellent queen, beloved by the people and respected by foreign dignitaries. But the timing also felt cruel, as if fate was deliberately testing his resolve. There's also this, Marcus said, producing a small wooden box. It arrived an hour ago with the morning post. No return address, but it bears the seal of Millbrook Village. Alexander's heart skipped. Elena must have sent something back with the ring. His hands trembled slightly as he opened the box, aware of Marcus watching his reaction carefully. Inside was a small loaf of bread, still warm from the oven, and a note written in Elena's careful handwriting. For your coronation day. May you always remember that the greatest kings are those who serve their people with love, even when love requires sacrifice. Be well, be happy, be the ruler your kingdom deserves. A friend who believes in you. The bread was shaped like a crown decorated with seeds that formed the pattern of Valdris's royal crest. Elena must have worked on it before dawn after returning from their midnight meeting. The gesture was so thoughtful, so perfectly like her, that Alexander had to excuse himself to the window to compose his emotions. "Sir," Marcus asked gently, "are you well?" "Fine," Alexander managed. "Just nervous about the day ahead." 2 hours later, Alexander stood in the palace's preparation chamber while a team of servants dressed him for his coronation. The ceremonial robes were magnificent, deep blue silk embroidered with golden threads, a cape lined with ermine fur, and boots made from the finest leather in the kingdom. Every piece had been worn by kings before him, connecting him to centuries of royal tradition. But as beautiful as the robes were, they felt like a costume for a play he wasn't sure he wanted to perform in. The man in the mirror looked like a king, but Alexander wondered if anyone could see the heartbroken young man hidden beneath all the finery. "You look magnificent, Your Highness," said Master Taylor, the palace's head of wardrobe. "Your father will be proud." Lady Catherine arrived for their private meeting just as the servants finished their work. She entered the chamber with perfect grace, her own dress a masterpiece of cream-colored silk and delicate lace. Her blonde hair was arranged in an intricate style that showcased a necklace of diamonds and sapphires, a gift from her father for this special occasion. She was undeniably beautiful, with intelligent blue eyes and a smile that had charmed diplomats across Europe. At 22, she had already proven herself to be well-educated, politically astute, and capable of handling the complex social demands of royal life. Any man would be honored to call her his wife. "Your Highness," she said, offering a perfect curtsy. "I hope I'm not intruding, but I felt we should speak before the day's events begin." "Of course, Lady Catherine. Please sit." Alexander gestured to a pair of comfortable chairs near the window. "How are you finding your accommodations? I hope everything has been to your satisfaction." "Everything has been wonderful, thank you." "Your staff has been most gracious." Lady Catherine settled herself with the poise of someone trained from birth in royal etiquette. "I wanted to discuss our upcoming engagement, if you're agreeable." "Certainly. I know this marriage is primarily a political alliance," she said with refreshing directness. "I don't expect romantic love to bloom overnight between us, but I hope we can build something meaningful together. Partnership, respect, perhaps even friendship that could grow into deeper feelings over time." Her honesty caught Alexander off guard. He had expected polite small talk, not this frank discussion of their future relationship. "I appreciate your candor," he replied. "This is indeed an arranged marriage for both of us, but I want you to know that I intend to honor you as my wife and queen. You'll have my respect and loyalty always." "And you'll have mine," Lady Catherine said. "I've studied your kingdom's history and culture extensively. I understand the responsibilities of being queen here, and I'm prepared to dedicate my life to serving your people alongside you." "What about your own desires?" Alexander asked. "Your own dreams and ambitions?" Lady Catherine smiled sadly. "I gave up the luxury of personal desires when I was born into a duke's family. My role was always to strengthen alliances through marriage, but I've made peace with that destiny. I find meaning in duty, purpose in service. Perhaps that sounds cold to you, but it's how I've learned to be content." Her words reminded Alexander painfully of Elena's wisdom the night before. Both women understood that personal happiness was secondary to larger responsibilities. The difference was that Lady Catherine had been raised to accept this reality, while Elena had discovered it through love and loss. "It doesn't sound cold," Alexander said quietly. "It sounds wise." "I hope we can be honest with each other always," Lady Catherine continued. "If there are other attachments in your past, I don't need to know the details. But I would ask that you close those chapters completely once we're married. I deserve a husband who is fully present in our marriage, not one whose heart remains elsewhere." Alexander felt heat rise in his cheeks. Did she know about Elena? Or was she simply being practical about the realities of royal marriages? "You have my word," he said solemnly. "When we marry, you'll have my complete loyalty and commitment." "Then I believe we can build something good together," Lady Catherine said, rising gracefully. "Now I should let you prepare for your coronation. This is your day, and I'm honored to witness it." After she left, Alexander sat alone in the preparation chamber, processing their conversation. Lady Catherine's directness and maturity impressed him. She wasn't asking for passionate love. She was asking for partnership, respect, and fidelity. These were reasonable requests from a woman who was giving up her own freedom to serve his kingdom. The coronation ceremony began at noon in the Great Hall, which had been transformed into something magical. Thousands of white roses decorated every surface, their fragrance filling the air. Representatives from dozens of kingdoms filled the seats, creating a sea of colorful silk and glittering jewelry. The common people of Valdres packed the galleries above, their faces glowing with pride and excitement. Alexander's father waited at the altar, wearing his own ceremonial robes and holding the ancient crown of Valdres. Despite his illness and fatigue, King Edmund looked dignified and proud as he prepared to pass the throne to his son. The ceremony itself felt like a dream. Alexander heard himself speaking the traditional oaths, promising to protect the kingdom and serve its people, with wisdom and justice. He felt the weight of the crown as his father placed it on his head, heavy with responsibility and history. The great hall erupted in cheers as he turned to face his subjects for the first time as their king. But through it all, part of his mind was elsewhere. He found himself thinking of Elena, probably preparing for her own wedding in 3 weeks. He wondered if she was thinking of him too, remembering their midnight goodbye as he accepted the crown that made their love impossible. The celebration continued long into the night. There was a magnificent feast with dishes from every province in the kingdom, music and dancing in the ballroom, and speeches from foreign dignitaries praising the new king's wisdom and promising continued friendship between their nations. Alexander played his part perfectly, smiling and dancing and making conversation with important guests. Lady Catherine was radiant beside him, charming everyone she met, and already showing the qualities that would make her an excellent queen. They danced together twice, moving in perfect harmony despite barely knowing each other. "You're a wonderful dancer," she complimented him as the musicians played a slow waltz. "As are you. Did you study in Paris?" "Vienna, actually. My mother insisted I learn from the best instructors in Europe." Lady Catherine smiled up at him. "You seem distracted tonight. Are you tired from the ceremony?" Alexander realized he had been scanning the crowd unconsciously, as if hoping to see a familiar face that he knew wouldn't be there. "Forgive me. It's been an overwhelming day." "Of course it has. Becoming king is perhaps the biggest change a man can experience." Her voice was kind, understanding, "But you handled the ceremony beautifully. Your people already love you." As the evening wound down, Alexander retreated to his private chambers, now the king's chambers, larger and more magnificent than his previous room. The crown sat on a special stand nearby, seeming to watch him with its embedded jewels. Tomorrow would bring his first day as king, with meetings and decisions and the 1,000 daily tasks of ruling a kingdom. Marcus helped him prepare for bed, efficiently removing the ceremonial robes and bringing simple nightclothes. "How do you feel, Your Majesty?" he asked. The first time he had used Alexander's new title. Different, Alexander replied honestly. Like I'm wearing someone else's life. That feeling will pass. You were born for this role. Was I? Sometimes I wonder if I was born for something simpler. A life where my choices only affected myself. Marcus folded the coronation robes carefully. Every king has wondered the same thing. But look what you accomplished today. You brought hope and joy to hundreds of thousands of people. You strengthened alliances that will keep peace in this region for decades. You honored your father and your ancestors. That's not nothing, Alexander. That's everything. After Marcus left, Alexander stood at his window looking out over the kingdom. His kingdom now. Lights twinkled in houses across the city, where families were probably discussing the day's ceremony and their hopes for the new king's reign. In 3 weeks, one of those lights would shine on Elena's wedding to David. In 3 months, the palace would host another celebration when Alexander married Lady Catherine. He touched the place where his signet ring used to be and whispered, "A prayer to whatever gods might be listening. Help me be worthy of this crown. Help me find happiness in duty and peace in sacrifice. And help Elena find joy with David, the kind of joy she deserves." Outside, the kingdom slept peacefully under the protection of their new king, unaware of the private heartbreak that had accompanied his public triumph. 3 weeks passed in a blur of royal duties and sleepless nights. King Alexander threw himself into his new role with determined intensity, as if constant work could quiet the thoughts that haunted him. He met with ministers every morning, reviewed trade agreements in the afternoon, and spent evenings learning about diplomatic relationships with neighboring kingdoms. His advisors praised his dedication and quick understanding of complex issues, but Marcus noticed the dark circles under his friend's eyes and the way he pushed food around his plate without eating. Today was Elena's wedding day. Alexander knew. This because he had been counting each sunrise since their goodbye in the apple grove. While he sat through meetings about grain exports and military spending, part of his mind was in Millbrook Village, imagining Elena in a simple white dress, walking toward a life with David the merchant's son. "Your Majesty, did you hear the question?" Minister Harrison's voice cut through Alexander's distraction. The older man was waiting for a response about proposed changes to tax collection in the northern provinces. "Forgive me. Could you repeat that?" The minister exchanged glances with the other men around the council table. This was the 3rd time this week that their usually sharp young king had seemed lost in thought during important discussions. "Perhaps we should adjourn for today," suggested Minister Bradley diplomatically. "These are complex matters that deserve our full attention when minds are fresh." Alexander nodded gratefully. "Yes, let's reconvene tomorrow morning." After the ministers filed out, Marcus approached the king's chair. "Alexander, you need to eat something and sleep. You're pushing yourself too hard." "I'm fine." "No, you're not. You're grieving, and that's understandable. But you can't govern a kingdom while half your mind is elsewhere." Alexander stood abruptly and walked to the tall windows overlooking the courtyard. Servants were busy preparing for another state dinner. This one to welcome ambassadors from 3 neighboring kingdoms who had come to formally recognize his reign. Lady Catherine would be his hostess, playing the role of future queen with grace and intelligence. "She's getting married today," Alexander said quietly. "I know. Right now, probably. It's afternoon in Millbrook. She's promising to love and honor another man, and I'm sitting here in a palace wearing a crown that prevented me from being the one beside her." Marcus joined him at the window. "You did the right thing letting her go. You know that." "Do I? Sometimes I wonder if duty and honor are just pretty words we use to justify cowardice. Maybe I should have been brave enough to choose love over everything else." "And then what? You'd have abandoned your father when he needed you most, left. Your people without their rightful king started a war with Moravia by refusing to marry Lady Catherine. Yes, you would have had Elena, but at the cost of everything else that makes you who you are. Alexander pressed his forehead against the cool glass. I keep thinking about her dress. Is it the same white cotton she wore to the village festivals? Or did her family manage to buy something special? Will she be happy when she sees David waiting for her? Will she think of me at all? Alexander. Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. You have to stop this. Elena is married now, or will be, in a few hours. She's starting a new life, and you need to do the same. Lady Catherine arrives tomorrow for the official engagement announcement. She deserves a man who's present and committed, not one who's mourning another woman. The words stung because they were true. Lady Catherine had been nothing but gracious and understanding. She had spent the past 3 weeks learning everything she could about Valdres's customs and people, studying the kingdom's history and culture so she could serve effectively as queen. She wrote thoughtful letters to Alexander's advisors, asking intelligent questions about everything from agricultural policies to military strategy. She was doing her part to make their arranged marriage successful. How do I stop loving her? Alexander asked, his voice barely above a whisper. You don't, probably. But you learn to love other things too. Your kingdom, your duties, your future, wife and children. Love isn't like water in a bucket, where adding more means some spills over. It's more like a garden. You can cultivate new plants without destroying the ones that came before. That evening, Alexander skipped the state dinner. He told his guests that urgent business required his attention, but actually he rode thunder to the highest hill overlooking his kingdom. From here he could see for miles in every direction. The capital city with its bustling markets and comfortable homes, the farmlands that fed his people, the forests that provided wood and game, the roads that connected communities and allowed trade to flourish. This was what he had chosen instead of love. This responsibility, these millions of lives that depended on his wisdom and strength. As the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Alexander tried to feel the satisfaction that should come from such a burden willingly accepted. Tomorrow, Lady Catherine would arrive for their engagement ceremony. The whole kingdom would celebrate as their future queen was officially welcomed into the royal family. Alexander would smile and dance and make speeches about their bright future. Together. In 3 months, they would marry in an even grander ceremony, cementing the alliance between their kingdoms and beginning a new chapter in both their lives. Help me be worthy of this choice, Alexander prayed to the darkening sky. Help me give Catherine the husband she deserves, and help Elena find happiness with David. The stars appeared one by one as night fell over the kingdom. Somewhere in a small village, Elena was probably dancing at her wedding celebration, laughing with friends and family, beginning her new life as a married woman. The thought brought both pain and a strange kind of peace. She would be safe now, loved by a good man who could give her everything Alexander never could. A normal life, freedom from the crushing weight of royal duty, children who could choose their own destinies. When Alexander finally returned to the palace, he found a letter waiting on his desk. For a moment, his heart stopped. Could it be from Elena? But the handwriting belonged to his father, King Edmund, who had retired early from the evening's festivities due to fatigue. My dear son, the letter began, I noticed your absence from tonight's dinner and suspect I know the reason. Today was difficult for you, and I remember well how such days feel. When I was your age, I spent many evenings wondering about the road not taken, the woman I didn't marry, the life I might have lived. But I want to share something with you that time has taught me. The heart's capacity for love is infinite, but it's also adaptable. The love I thought I had lost forever. When I married, your mother didn't disappear. It transformed into something else. The passionate longing of youth became deep appreciation for what I did have. A kingdom at peace. People who trusted me. Children who made me proud. Your mother and I built our love slowly, like constructing a cathedral. Each shared decision, each crisis weathered together, each small kindness added another stone to the foundation. By the time she died, I loved her with a depth and certainty that my young self couldn't have imagined possible. Lady Catherine is a remarkable woman who deserves your best effort. Give her that gift, and I believe you'll be surprised by what grows between you. The heart that has known deep love once has greater capacity for love again, not less. Your loving father, Edmund. Alexander read the letter 3 times, finding comfort in his father's wisdom and experience. King Edmund had lived through this same struggle and emerged with a marriage full of genuine love and partnership. Perhaps there was hope for happiness, even if it looked different from what Alexander had once dreamed. He walked to his writing desk and pulled out fresh parchment. After several false starts, he began composing a letter to Lady Catherine. My dear Lady Catherine, I wanted to write to you before tomorrow's ceremony to express how honored I am by your willingness to become my wife and queen. I know this marriage began as a political arrangement, but I hope we can build something genuine and lasting together. You bring grace, intelligence, and strength to our union, qualities that will make you beloved by our people and valued by me as both partner and friend. I promise to give you my respect, my loyalty, and my earnest effort to be the husband you deserve. Until tomorrow, with anticipation, Alexander. He sealed the letter and gave it to a servant to deliver to Lady Catherine's chambers. It wasn't a love letter, but it was honest and hopeful, a foundation they could build on. Outside his window, the kingdom slept peacefully under stars that shone equally on palace and cottage, on kings and bakers' daughters, on the loves we choose and the loves we leave behind. 2 years later, King Alexander stood in the royal gardens watching his wife tend to her roses. Queen Catherine had transformed the neglected flower beds into something magnificent, creating spaces where diplomats could walk and discuss treaties, where children from the village school could come to learn about plants, and where she could find peace during the demanding days of royal life. The white ones are blooming beautifully this year, Alexander said, joining her beside a bush heavy with pristine flowers. They remind me of the roses at my father's castle, Catherine replied, carefully pruning a dead branch. I planted them, hoping they would help this place feel more like home. Does it? Feel like home now? Catherine paused in her work and looked at him thoughtfully. They had grown comfortable with these honest conversations, learning to speak directly about their feelings without the formal politeness that had marked their early interactions. Yes, it does. More each day. She smiled, and Alexander was struck by how much more relaxed she seemed now compared to the careful diplomatic woman he had first met. What made you ask? I was thinking about change, how we adapt to lives we didn't originally choose for ourselves. Their marriage had unfolded exactly as King Edmund had predicted in his letter. Love hadn't struck like lightning, but it had grown gradually through shared experiences and mutual respect. Catherine proved to be not just an excellent queen, but a woman of surprising warmth and humor when she felt safe enough to show those sides of herself. Alexander discovered that her political intelligence came paired with genuine compassion for their people, and her formal education was balanced by practical wisdom about human nature. They worked well together as partners in ruling the kingdom. Catherine had established new programs to help widows and orphans, while Alexander focused on improving trade relationships and strengthening the military. Their different strengths complemented each other perfectly, and their advisors often remarked on how smoothly the kingdom ran under their joint leadership. I have news, Catherine said, setting down her pruning shears. I wanted to tell you before anyone else knows. What kind of news? The kind that means our family is going to grow. Her hand moved unconsciously to her stomach. The royal physician confirmed it this morning. We're going to have a child. Alexander felt a surge of joy so pure and unexpected that it nearly knocked him off balance. A child. Their child. Someone who would carry forward both their bloodlines and inherit the kingdom they were building together. Catherine, that's wonderful. He picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing. When he set her down, her face was glowing with happiness. Are you pleased? I know we never discussed timing, but I'm thrilled. You're going to be an amazing mother. Alexander kissed her forehead gently. How are you feeling? Are you well? Tired, but healthy. The physician says everything is progressing normally. Catherine took his hands in hers. I've been thinking about names. For a boy, perhaps Edmund, after your father. And for a girl, Elena, Alexander said without thinking, then immediately regretted it. The name had slipped out before he could stop himself. Catherine's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. That's a beautiful name. Is it significant to you? This was the moment Alexander had been dreading for 2 years. They had built their marriage on honesty and trust, but he had never told Catherine about Elena. The secret felt like a lie between them, especially now when they were planning their child's future. Can we sit? He asked, gesturing to a bench beneath an apple tree. The irony of the location wasn't lost on him. Apple trees seemed to be present for all the most important conversations of his life. Catherine, before we married, there was someone else. A woman I loved who could never have been my queen. Catherine was quiet for several long moments, studying his face. The baker's daughter from Millbrook Village? Alexander's surprise must have shown clearly. You knew? I suspected. You were so careful never to mention her name or speak of your past, but that kind of careful silence usually means something important. And there were small signs. The way you sometimes looked sad during our early months together. How you insisted on taking long rides alone. The fact that your signet ring went missing just before our engagement. You never said anything. What would have been the point? You chose to marry me, chose to honor your commitments. Whether you had loved someone else before didn't change our present reality. Catherine reached for his hand. But I'm glad you're telling me now. Marriage should have room for truth, even difficult truth. Her name was Elena, Alexander continued. I met her when I was traveling in disguise through the kingdom. We fell in love, but we both knew it was impossible. She married a merchant's son the day of my coronation. I haven't seen or contacted her since the night before I became king. Do you still love her? The question hung in the air between them. Alexander considered lying, giving Catherine the simple answer she probably wanted to hear. But their marriage deserved better than that. I still have love for her, yes. She was my first love, and that leaves marks on a person's heart that never completely fade. But Catherine, he turned to face her fully. What I feel for you is different, but equally real. You've become essential to me in ways I never expected. You're my partner, my friend, my queen, and now the mother of my child. I love you deeply, completely, and differently than I loved her. Catherine was crying softly, though she was smiling at the same time. Thank you for telling me. And for answering honestly instead of saying what you thought I wanted to hear. Are you upset? No. Sad for you both, perhaps, that you had to give up something so precious. But not upset. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. I think I might like to name our daughter Elena, if we have a daughter. Not to honor your past love exactly, but to honor the capacity for love itself. The fact that you could love her so deeply gives me confidence that you can love our child just as fiercely. Alexander stared at his wife in amazement. Her generosity and wisdom continued to surprise him, even after 2 years of marriage. Are you certain? I'm certain. Elena is a beautiful name for what I hope will be a beautiful daughter. That evening they announced Catherine's pregnancy to the court. The great hall erupted in celebration as nobles and servants alike shared in the royal couple's joy. King Edmund, now officially retired but still living in the palace, wept openly with happiness at the news of his coming grandchild. "A new generation," he said, embracing Alexander warmly. "Your mother would be so proud." Later that night, as Catherine slept peacefully beside him, Alexander lay awake thinking about the child growing inside her. Would it be a son who would someday wear his crown, or a daughter who would bring new possibilities to the royal line? Would they have Catherine's intelligence and grace, or his sense of duty and determination, or some wonderful combination of both? For the first time in 2 years, Alexander allowed himself to wonder about Elena without guilt. Was she happy with David? Did she have children of her own by now? Had she found the peace and contentment she deserved? He hoped so, with all his heart. The next morning brought news that would test every lesson Alexander had learned about love, duty, and sacrifice. Marcus arrived at the royal chambers earlier than usual, his face grave with concern. "Your Majesty, there's been an incident in Millbrook Village, a fire at the bakery. Several people were injured." Alexander's blood turned cold. "How many injured? How badly?" "Thomas the baker suffered burns but will recover. His wife Sarah is well." "But—" Marcus hesitated. "Elena, the baker's daughter, now Elena Miller, she was trapped on the 2nd floor. They got her out, but she's in serious condition. The physician there has limited supplies and expertise." Alexander was already moving toward his wardrobe, pulling out riding clothes. "Prepare thunder. I'm going to Millbrook." "Alexander, wait." Catherine appeared in the doorway, having heard the end of their conversation. "Think about this carefully. If you ride to her village now, people will talk. It could cause a scandal. I don't care about scandal. She could die. I know. And your instinct to help someone in need is one of the things I love about you." Catherine moved closer, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "But you're not just Alexander anymore. You're the king. Your actions have consequences for our kingdom, our alliances, our unborn child." Alexander stopped dressing and looked at his wife, torn between duty and the desperate need to help the woman who still held a piece of his heart. "What if," Catherine said carefully, "we sent our best physician to Millbrook instead, along with medicines and supplies? You could help her without creating political complications." It was a perfect compromise, practical, generous, and protective of everyone involved. Alexander felt a rush of love for his wife's wisdom and her willingness to help Elena despite their complicated history. "Marcus, send Dr. Whitmore immediately with our finest medical supplies," Alexander ordered. "Tell him the king commands that. He save Elena Miller's life, whatever it takes." "Yes, Your Majesty." After Marcus left, Alexander sat heavily on the edge of the bed. Catherine joined him, taking his hand in both of hers. "Will this always be how it is?" he asked. "Will every crisis, every decision, every moment of my life be filtered through what's best for the crown instead of what feels right in my heart?" "Yes," Catherine said simply. "But Alexander, look what your crown accomplished today. Elena will receive the best medical care in the kingdom because you're king. Your power and position allow you to help people in ways that ordinary men cannot. The sacrifice you made 2 years ago gave you the ability to save her life today." 3 days later, word came that Elena Miller would make a full recovery. Dr. Whitmore's skill and the palace's medical supplies had indeed saved her life. She would carry scars from the fire, but she would live to raise her children and grow old with her husband. Alexander never saw Elena again. He never needed to. The knowledge that she was alive and well, that his crown had given him the power to protect her when she needed it most, felt like a gift from the universe, a sign that the path he had chosen, painful as it was, had been the right one. 5 months later, Queen Catherine gave birth to a healthy daughter with her mother's blue eyes and her father's dark hair. They named her Princess Elena, and she became the light of both their lives. Years passed peacefully in the kingdom of Valdres. King Alexander ruled with wisdom and compassion. Queen Catherine became beloved by the people for her charitable works and intelligence, and Princess Elena grew into a bright, curious child who charmed everyone she met. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, Alexander would stand at his window and look toward Millbrook Village, wondering about the other Elena. Whether she was happy, whether her children were healthy, whether she ever thought of the prince who had loved her enough to let her go. But these moments of remembrance no longer brought pain. Instead, they brought a deep sense of gratitude for love experienced, for duty fulfilled, for a life that had room for both sacrifice and joy. He had learned what his great-grandfather's journal had tried to teach him, that the heart can hold many kinds of love simultaneously, and that sometimes the greatest act of love is knowing when to walk away. In the end, Alexander discovered that being torn between love and duty hadn't destroyed him. It had made him more human, more compassionate, and ultimately a better king than he ever could have been without that sweet, painful education of the heart.